주십시오.
Today, I am going to answer what is it like to be in a PhD program. Thank you for the suggestion of this video topic because I know a lot of you may be thinking about entering into a PhD program. Doing your own research can be a little bit limiting and difficult. So I'm going to share a little bit of my experience and hopefully give you some insights. Okay, so I know there are a lot of different types of PhD programs. I went to the program for neuroscience at Emory University, which is in the United States, and that might be a little bit different the way it's structured versus how programs are structured in Europe or Asia, and even from programs itself, depending on whether you're doing a PhD in science versus humanities, the requirements might be very, very different. So you have to know what you're going to target as a school, and then also figure out whether your program is a good fit for you. So there's a lot of things to consider. But for today, I'm going to focus on a science PhD program since I went to a neuroscience program. The kind of problems that you encounter are going to evolve over time. So what I mean by that, in the beginning of my neuroscience PhD, I barely knew what a neuron was. This was my first time learning neuroscience in a formal classroom setting. I mean, I took some neuroanatomy, like anatomy course, where I knew what a frontal lobe was, but I didn't know the nitty gritty background knowledge. I didn't have that kind of a knowledge. Or learning how to do a cerebrotaxic surgery was difficult for me. But over time, the challenges become not just the methods that you're working on, but now it becomes more conceptual. In the beginning, I was trying to get the animals to behave the way I want them to, or an experiment. I was trying to learn how to do experiments like, electrophysiology. I was learning how to do analysis. I was learning how to do the code because I've never done that before. And so all of these new skill sets that you're learning is what's happening in the beginning, trying to troubleshoot how do I get this thing to work. To now, in the later part of PhD, you start to have more of a conceptual problem. Is like, does this hypothesis actually make sense? Or how do I translate my results into the context of other people's work, right? How do I put this into, the greater impact of this research? So all of those questions are going to change, and the way you look at your project is also going to change. There are two different types of milestones. So I'm going to talk about the program-wide requirements, the program-wide common milestones, and then the second type of milestones, which is a project or student-specific milestones. Year one, I would say 80% of it is the coursework, where you are going to learn specific background knowledge that is going to be really important for your major research topics. So, for example, for neuroscience, I took classes on molecular biology, neuroanatomy. I took classes on the different types of experimental tools that we use in the field of neuroscience research. It's got midterms, finals. So if you don't want to get kicked out, you have to meet the basic requirements. Of course, once you graduate PhD, no one is ever going to ask you what your GPA was, so don't even sweat it. But you have to meet the right criteria so that you can continue in the program and do the research that you love to do. It's pretty much the same as the, let's say, master's or bachelor's degrees program. But then what's different is that you may also get a lab rotation experience. And this is kind of program dependent because some programs offer rotations, others don't. So typically students will do 2 to 3 to 4 different types of rotations, maybe 10 weeks to 3 months at a time. And at the end of the rotations, you'll pick a lab that is the best fit for you. I have a whole set of lists of questions that I want to ask to help you decide on the best mentor, because finding the right lab in a PhD program is so important. And I recommend, if you are deciding on which program to apply, consider applying to programs where there is a required rotations so that you can actually have a trial period to select the right lab before you go into it thinking that everything's going to be wonderful and beautiful. But there are things that you might not realize that matter until you actually start working in the lab. Okay. After finding your lab, you have to decide on the research proposal. The way Emory was organized, I was taking the written qualifying exam, and then after the second year, in the beginning of this third year, I was required to do the oral qualifying exam, and that was the big deal. Once you pass the oral qual, that's when you become the PhD candidate. Then the final milestone really is to defend your thesis or dissertation research. So everything that you've learned, everything that you've done research, you are able to now write your dissertation, and you can present that to the public as well as your committee members so that you can pass that defense. There's also a student and project specific milestones. So one is kind of research planning, execution, and output. So this is kind of the main meat of every PhD program, especially for science PhD program, is you have to have some sort of a research topic that you want to decide to work on for 5 to 6 years. So for this planning stage, and this is where you are defining your research topic that you're interested in. When you're more explorative and you're trying to strategize on which direction to take next, that's when you're reading papers. That's when you're doing some ideation, I call it. You are figuring out what sort of questions you should be asking and how to analyze. And so, what exactly do you want to study for the next 5, 6, 7 years? And how can you answer that? And this is figuring out your methods, experimental tools. Are you going to use mice or human subjects to do your research? Things of that nature. And then you can put all of that together into a timeline for experiments. I actually use Google Calendar to organize all my experiments. Like it looks like I had to order mice to arrive by a certain date. I have experimental schedules like when I should be recording, when I should be doing surgeries, when I should be doing the trainings. All of that is into a single calendar. Sounds like an obvious thing, but I've seen so many times where people haven't realized to plan their experiments right into a timeline that by the time the experiment time rolls around, you realize, oh, this equipment is broken, or we ran out of these reagents at the last second. These are the things that you have to kind of plan ahead and make sure that you have everything that you need before you start. Okay, execution. Obviously, once you have a plan, you got to execute on it. This is actually, I think, comes with the mastering of the tools. My typical recording was like 5 to 7 hours, and that will be the majority of the day. And then you go home, decompress, eat something good, and try to sleep and repeat. So you may figure out that you want to use experimental tool A, but you have to learn how to use that. Of course, if you already have previous research experience and you're doing exactly the same as before in your PhD program, then obviously you're ahead of the game. But for a lot of people, you'll be learning how to do things like if you're using animals, you might have to learn how to do surgeries on mice. You might have to do how to do recordings, especially for neuroscience, for the type of questions that you're asking. Once you master the experimental tools, you will do your experiments. Then you'll have to do the analyses, and this is one of the most important part and sometimes the most frustrating part because you may have to learn how to code to do the analysis. You may have to use a very specialized software tool or hardware tool to get this thing to work. So all of this takes a bit of learning. As part of the execution theme, you also are learning how to write and make figures. Making good figures is really important because this is the visual ways to display what you've learned in the experiment that you just conducted for the whole world to learn about your research. So in fact, before writing any paper that I've ever written, you actually start with a list of figures that you like to compose, and that becomes the roadmap for the the entire that becomes the outline for the entire paper. Now, this final part for the research planning, execution, and output is the output. And this is basically showing your work in written or verbal format. Written is obviously a paper, it can be an experimental original paper, or it can be a review paper where you organize everybody else's thoughts into a summary of things. Um, and it could also be a verbal presentation where you're giving a speech at a conference or you're doing a poster presentation, all of which requires you to visually display what you've learned with some data that's analyzed, visually pleasing way, and you can explain your research in a way that everyone can understand what you're talking about. So that also takes some art of communication and data storytelling. Another type of milestones I highly recommend taking part of if there's an opportunity. You should look into the professional development milestones. And this is not a milestones like in a truest sense, in that you don't have to do it by a certain date, or programs don't require that, but it's something that I think it's important to have in the back of your mind, so that these are the things to consider as you as you move into the senior years of your PhD, and then have to consider what career options you have in the life after your PhD program. Believe it or not, you're not going to be in PhD program forever. So you want to plan things ahead so you're not staying there for more than 7 years, and you can get out with a job and a future plan. There's also teaching opportunities. So most programs will require you to do a TA-ship. Teaching assistantship is something that I wasn't the some programs will require you to do that to receive funding as a TA. You may be teaching an undergraduate course for that major, and you may be helping the faculty to facilitate the course better. Thankfully, at Emory, I was only required to do the TA for only one semester. And of course, there are multiple levels of opportunities if you want to continue teaching, but I knew that it wasn't going to be my main thing that I wanted to focus on in my PhD. So I did my one semester of requirement, and then I did my other things that I wanted to. I wanted to develop my skill sets that are going to be helpful for my future career. And in doing so, I knew that communications was going to be really important. So I sought out opportunities to communicate better, especially scientific data, and also learned how to work with people from different backgrounds, not just scientists, not just the neuroscientists, but also people from business, nursing, public health, undergraduates. So all of these different fields and fields of study is so important to understand and learn how to communicate and solve problems together. So I've done some hackathons, I've done some competitions. On that note, I think professional networking is something that most students don't even think about when they first enter the PhD program. Okay, so you may not know exactly what you want to do after PhD, but it's a good idea to start networking and learn um, what kind of options there are available to you with a PhD, whether you know that you're going to be in academia, you know that for sure you're going to be a faculty member, even then, it's still important to talk to people with the similar degrees. Maybe you can talk to your alumni members, you can talk to people in industry. Actually, you can reach out to people on LinkedIn cold turkey, like, hey, I'm a student in this program. I would love to get some insights into what sort of roles that you have and your experience in your industry journey. Can we chat for 15 minutes? You know, most people are actually surprisingly helpful when you say, I'm a student and I need help. So take advantage of it while you're in your program, your student status, and trying to learn as much as possible from people around you before you are seriously ready to graduate. Um, I think one of the most important things is that you need to keep your sanity. So keep that 5% protected for your sanity. Keep that time for your friends, keep the time for your hobbies, keep the time for health, going to the gym and eating right. Because I know I'm guilty of not doing that right and actually got sick and didn't realize it until it was too late. So something that keeps your energy, keeps your motivation is basically taking good care of yourself. No one is actually going to drag you if you're not doing it yourself. So be kind to your body, and you need to focus on keeping your sanity time. It's a lot if you're doing 2 recordings a day for a whole week straight up. So, and of course, that's something that is going to depend on what your research experiment is like. Make your work relevant to what you're trying to pursue for the future of the future career after the PhD. So, for example, if you're interested in, let's say, data science as a role, then you may want to study how, you may want to use Python as opposed to learning MATLAB because that's the industry standard. I use MATLAB and that was my majority of the time, but once I learned one sort of programming language, then you can go into R or Python and other languages that is important for your analysis. Your thesis project becomes your whole baby, but and you are the main driver of it because no one else is going to move that project forward unless you're working. But what to keep in mind is that you are also a whole person, not just somebody that does research. So it's important to keep a balanced diet, balanced physical activity, balanced time with work and personal, and your relationships don't suffer. Make sure that you're seeing your friends and having coffee chats. I also took a good advantage of all the social networking or social opportunities. At Emory, we had galas every year. We had a lot of freebies available, like lots of events that you were being treated to a free dinner, free lunch, or free beer. This is where I learned a lot of different types of beer existed, so now I know what I like. You have a lot of freedom and willpower to be able to make things happen, but at the same time, you also have to, make sure that you take ownership of your own life, not just your project. Because, like I said, you are not just somebody who does research, but you are a whole person with specific hobbies, with relationships, with health to take care of. Also, beyond the PhD level, you also need to develop your personal. And sometimes you just go outside and take your 10 minutes of your decompressed time, just walking outside in the fresh air, get some fresh air, and come back, and you'll feel so much better.